including a win in Denver not too long back. This time he has Cunning Wish, a singleton in the main deck, which I believe is a new addition. He was telling us that he had found it, used it to get a Ravenous Trap in Game 1 against Dredge.
Yes, he actually told me that while I was walking by. Yeah, he was pretty stoked about that.
And Moneybags over here also sprung for a main deck mode. So we might be seeing that one too.
Well, he wins so much that it doesn't even matter. Like he wins so much of these legacy tournaments that that's nothing to him.
Yeah, it's basically free.
On the left-hand side, Bryan Eleyet. I spoke about him yesterday at the top of the show. He is part of the Spokane contingent. That is also a group of 2 people, in case you were counting at home, Patrick. But Bryan Eleyet, if you guys are familiar with that name, he is the individual who got runner-up at Grand Prix Providence a couple years back with Hivemind. He's kind of the person who made it a thing, and that is what he is playing again. So these are 2 players who are playing the decks that they are basically known for. Now, Eleyet's deck list has Show and Tell in it as well. He can Show and Tell in to play Hivemind or Emrakul, the Aeon's Torn. And then he's also got some interesting things here as well, with Grim Monolith to be able to hard cast Hivemind, Intuitions to be able to find either part of the combo, some Patent Negations to be able to protect Show and Tell, or to be able to force Hivemind through, or to be able to actually kill them with Hivemind. So this deck hasn't seen a lot of play recently, but it's a deck that Bryan always plays, so it'll be interesting to see how he does. And both players are 2-0 to start the tournament. So.
Yep. And, Hivemind sort of came into being as an answer to, Mental Misstep. It was a combo deck that could largely ignore Misstep when that was a big part of the format.
Yeah.
And presumably, it would have some degree of durability against Counterbalance as well, as far as combo decks go.
Yes.
Because again, your key combo piece is 6.
As both players do keep their openings 7, Joe just leads with an Island Go, boring old Miracles.
Yep.
Nothing exciting happening here, as Bryan is going to sacrifice a Flooded Strand, dealing himself 1 point of damage, and finding my favorite picture of an island, without question. You probably don't like those, but
No.
yeah, I love the unhinged ones so much.
Too gimmicky.
Too beautiful. And we're gonna see a Ponderu.
It's going to be allowed to resolve.
As Joe flipped through his hand, for Bryan, we see a Brainstorm, a Hivemind, and looked to be a basic land. Joe briefly showed us his hand. I saw Force of Will and Jace the Mind Sculptor. So if it's fighting over Hivemind, we're going to have to do. Joe already has 1 tool to do that.
Yeah. Jace being among the easier ways to win the game against a combo deck once you have your control element stabilized.
Yes, without question.
Does it all by itself.
Ponder's going to be a keeper. We see a Hivemind in Bryan's hand already as well. He's going to elect to keep the beautiful unhinged island and pass the turn back.
So does Joe appears to be without a second land, so he's going to Brainstorm in his main phase to look for it. Picks up a Flooded Strand.
Flooded Strand looks to be a Terminus as well, and then the 3rd card looks to be a Mystery. There are 2 forces hiding out in Joe's hand that we know of, along with that Jace. He's going to play a Flooded Strand. We also see another Brainstorm as well, so if he wants to shuffle away those 2 cards, he does have the Flooded Strand to do that.
Yeah. Presumably he's still unaware of what he's playing against. So.
Yeah, especially if he doesn't know Bryan, and he doesn't know what Bryan plays, because Bryan isn't a writer or anything, so I know him because he's kind of more of a local guy, and I keep up with the results a lot, but if Joe doesn't know who that is, Hivemind isn't something you're going to put someone on walking into a Legacy tournament.
Right. So finds a Tundra during the upkeep. Searches during his upkeep in case Bryan were to have Stifle, would force Bryan to use the mana on his own, or on Joe's turn rather than his own. Draws a 3rd land. Finds a Misty Rainforest there.
And we're going to see a Counterbalance here, attempt to resolve for Joe. Interesting thing here is, Patrick, you brought up at the top of the match, Counterbalance not particularly good in this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, certainly Bryan has a variety of cantrips and such, but it's not, the same dagger it is against Storm or other combo decks like that.
As we see, Bryan looks to be responding by sacrificing the Misty Rainforest to get another basic island. Now, Bryan's deck list in front of me, it looks like he does have a little higher basic count than most, I guess, combo decks would have with 4 basic islands in his deck. So, if he's playing against a deck that does have Wasteland, he's actually doing rather well against that.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the few disruption pieces that decks without counterspells basically have against you.
As because we're going to see a Brainstorm in response to the counterbalance. So counterbalance still on the stack.
I very highly value having a plethora of basics and combo decks, just because if you lose to decks without Force of Will, it almost invariably involves Wasteland.
Yes. And so, of the options that Bryan does have in his hand, we know he has a Pact of the Titan, a Hive Mind hiding out in there. A Polluted Delta is one of his options as well to put back with the Brainstorm. Polluted Delta will help shuffle away some of the cards as we are reading counterbalance, just to make sure we know what it does. Now, one interaction in this particular matchup, Patrick, that is interesting is counterbalance is unable, when Hive Mind is in play, to actually, when you cast a Pact, it doesn't counter the copy that goes in the stack.
Right, yeah. You need stifle effects to stop the combo. Like, counter spells don't work once Hive Mind's in play.
Yes, which is something that will likely come up in this match. I'm sure that Joe knows the interaction, but it's something that will probably come up, and when it does, we can talk more in depth about it.
Yeah.
So we see Polluted Delta help to clear one of the cards from the Brainstorm. Searching like crazy for another island. And he does have a Volcanic Island in his deck list. And, wow. So he has 3 Misties, 2 Flooded Strands, 2 Scalding Tarns, and a Polluted Delta, and then 4 islands and 1 Volcanic Island. So not a ton of, like non-basics in his deck.
Does he have any sources of green mana? Because he has Fire Spout in his sideboard.
None.
Okay.
Not that you're going to be killing a lot of flyers a lot of the time, but he has 8 fetch lands, so it wouldn't be a surprise to see a tropical island in his deck or anything.
All right, so it looks like Bryan's attempting to resolve a Gitaxian Probe. Joe missed on his blind counterbalance reveal, showing an island, and then Joe's going to show a pretty awesome hand of 2 Force of Wills, a Brainstorm, and a Jace the Mind Sculptor.
So a pretty good hand that Joe has. He can definitely fight over a Hive Mind with 2 Force of Wills. In addition, we know that he has an island on top of his deck from the counterbalance, but he has a way to reset that with the Misty Rainforest in play.
Mm-hmm.
As Bryan does draw Volcanic Island off of the Gitaxian Probe.
He also, if he doesn't crack his Rainforest, he also knows he's guaranteed to be able to resolve Jace next turn if he's feeling so inclined.
Yes, a 4th mana source.
Yep.
Certainly not a bad thing. Jace plus a Brainstorm, all that good stuff.
Still, it's again the Hive Mind deck is based on so many high casters that it's not. Like, he might be able to just fight through a counterbalance. Joe does not have a lot of cards in this deck that line up with, say, Intuition. Certainly, Hive Mind is only taggable by Terminus.
Yeah, just the strategy that the strategy of this deck does a nice job of getting through like an active counterbalance plus Sensei's Divining Top. Like, that isn't something that Bryan, once that combination is made, that he's really going to worry about. And he just passes back, so we're going to see an Intuition here.
Trying to look at the cards in his deck that match this. He has a Vendilion Click. So I guess Joe is just more happy to sit on his 2 Force of Wills than try to land Jace here.
I mean, that's what it seems like. With the way his hand is, yeah, he has 2 Force of Wills. He can also Brainstorm in response, and she's just going to do a blind counterbalance, revealing Misty Rainforest. So Intuition has gotten past the counterbalance part of things. Now it's going to see if Joe's going to actually let it resolve.
Yep.
But between 2 Force of Wills, 2 blue cards, and a Brainstorm to be able to put cards back for the counterbalance, I feel like that may just be a better option than just casting Jace, brainstorming a Fate Sealing, just kind of hoping things go your way.
Well, the concern is that you can't lean too heavily on your counterbalance here because its value is indeterminate and likely to be low.
Sure, it's not much of an all-star in this matchup, basically. That makes sense. As it looks like he's searching out 3 Force of Wills for his Intuition. 3 Force of Wills it will be.
So, 2 in the graveyard, 1 to the hand. Joe shuffling up while Bryan tries to assemble a hand that can push through all the counter spells that he knows about from an earlier Gitaxian Probe.
And when you intuition for 3 Force of Wills, it's kind of the signal that, okay, like I'm going for it this following turn. We are going to see.
I believe this is a Grim Monolith we're about to see.
Monolith it is.
So the question now is, does Joe want to reset? Again, he has nothing in his hand that he can brainstorm on top to free roll on the Monolith. So
and Joe knows that he isn't going to die this turn. You know, even if the Monolith were to resolve, he's not going to die this turn. But Monolith is something that is worth fighting over. Not really with Force of Will, but potentially, you know, casting a Brainstorm, hoping to find a 2, since 2s are more abundant in his deck.
So he's announcing that he's triggering the counterbalance, and he's going to try to resolve Brainstorm here.
2, 3. We know that one of the cards is Misty Rainforest. Not sure of the other 2.
I assume by the amount of time it's taking him here that he did not find a 2 caster to put on top.
I mean, the time it's taking it's easy to assume he didn't find it 2, but he also just kind of wants to sculpt like his following turns.
Sure.
You know, if he wants to put some cards back, one of which is put a 2 on top and then shuffle it away with Misty Rainforest. I think there's a lot that goes into this brainstorm.
Oh, definitely. There's also like, well, what spells is he going to follow up with?
Yeah.
And so you want to set something on top that you think has a chance of tagging something later on in the turn. Because like he found Sensei's Divining Top, and so he left that on top, I think, because it would be reasonable that he could follow up with like Ponder or Gataxian Probe or something, and then you'd be able to tag that.
Yeah. As we do see Sensei's Divining Top resolve. Joe putting the other Misty Rainforest into play, which means he is able to clear for his counterbalance twice now.
Yes.
And now his hand is a Force of Will, a Jace, and a Mystery Blue card.
Yeah, I believe he kept a Force of Will. There's currently Force of Will on top of his deck.
Sure. So when the Force of Will fight begins,
Right.
he's able to reveal 5. As we are going to see Hive Mind put on the stack.
And Bryan, for his turn, actually drew his 4th Force of Will. So now he has 2 Force of Wills. I don't know if he has enough blue cards to fight twice, but Joe leaving the Force of Will on top of his deck means that he's in the clear to fight this.
As we are going to see Force of Will put on the stack for Joe. Targeting counterbalance, he's going to remove either Jace or the Vendilion Click in his hand. Would not be surprised to see it be the Jace so that he can Vendilion Click in response if he needs to.
Yeah.
But it is definitely a tough one here, and it is going to be Jace.
Yeah. Just going to let it go?
Yep. Passes back. He's going to top on his end step. And I think what he's going to end up doing is he's probably going to float that Force of Will around the top so that he doesn't draw it.
And I think Bryan wisely choosing not to fight over it on that turn, because based on Joe's brainstorm, I think he could reasonably deduce that there was a Force of Will floating in those cards.
Yeah.
So the problem now is, like, how does he induce? So yeah, presumably Joe has still floated the Force of Will onto the top of his deck. Because now he's in a position where he actually, if he has to shuffle this turn, he loses his Force of Will.
Correct. And we're going to see a Force of Will from Bryan, removing one of the blue cards in his hand. Can't quite tell what it is.
So assuming Joe set this correctly now, he's going to be able to...
If it is his second card, if it is the top card, not the following card down, then he will be able to counter, and that is...
Glacial Fortress.
Glacial
Okay.
Fortress. Now, that may be on purpose.
Sure.
Because now we know for sure the next card is Force of Will.
I just don't know why you would float that instead of a 0.
I would agree with that, yes. I think that may have been a sequencing mistake by Joe. And we're going to untap Monolith on the end step.
I believe he's saying go.
going to see a Snapcaster Mage now.
This is one of 2 copies of Snapcaster Mage, along with a Vendilion Clique, which makes up his entire creature base.
And Snapcaster is going to target Brainstorm. We are going to have the opportunity to Brainstorm. And for those of you guys wondering at home while Joe is resolving this Brainstorm, the card that was exiled by Bryan's Force of Will was a Gataxian Probe.
All right, so we're going to shuffle away at the end of the turn. Bryan giving his deck a little knock.
A little pat on the back. Help me! Also spin the top. Looks like Island, potentially a Glacial Forest, and a card in for 2. He's quick.
Yep. Bryan already fairly low due to, you know, Force of Willing and fetching and Phyrexian mana. So down to 12 already from Joe's first attack. Joe, I believe, has Force of Will plus blue card in hand right now?
It is Force of Will, Snapcaster Mage, as far as I know. I will draw a card. Bryan draws Ancient Tomb. It never hurts to read a card.
No. And this is you know, the tough bind that Bryan's kind of in here is that he wants to assemble a hand to be able to, like, go off over the top of a counter spell plus whatever's, you know, he suspects is floating because of the top of the counterbalance. But also, time doesn't really favor him here because Joe's just going to be able to sculpt a better hand as time goes on.
Yeah.
So,
plus, with the Snapcaster Mage in his hand, you know, an end step we could see against Snapcaster Mage plus Brainstorm. And then the clock gets a little bit shorter.
So we're going to start with the Divining Top activation, looking at 3 lands.
He's going to choose to sacrifice his Misty Rainforest. Go down to 16. We get Tundra number 3.
I suspect we are spinning again.
2, 3. I see a Plains. Spell Pierce and a Sensei's Top.
Okay.
And for 2.
Knocking Bryan down to 9.
Spell Pierce is actually a fairly good draw there, I think.
Joe just plugging away. Trying to, hopefully that his counterbalance on top and his soft. All right, so it looks like Bryan's going for it here.
It's time to move in.
Yep.
Hive Mind.
It's gonna be a hard cast, Force of Will.
It's gonna be interesting to see how he sequences this. So we're going to see a Snapcaster Mage in response to Hive Mind.
We're going to Brainstorm.
So this is the fun part.
Yeah.
Picking your spots. Which cards are we going to fight over? Which aren't we going to fight over? Because I'm fairly sure that Bryan has like a Forcible and a blue card and a Pact Negation in his hand. Mm-hmm. And we know that Joe has a Forcible and a blue card and like a Spell Pierce hovering around the top of his deck. And, you know, as we see a Force of Will targeting Snapcaster Mage, removing Pact Negation. Or actually, I believe it's targeting the Brainstorm. My apologies.
Yep. So, Lossett's hand is just the two Force of Wills right now. So he can spin his top looking for a 5 or a 6. 5 allowing him to counter Force of Will, and 6 allowing him to counter Hive Mind. And he'll also have the information on how he needs to.
Here's top
Wow.
swords. Yep.
Joe out of ways to shuffle, so he can't reset and try again.
just getting the stack a little bit organized here.
So I'm surprised we didn't fight over the Snapcaster Mage, because if this goes poorly now, it's 2 turns is our clock instead of significantly longer.
Indeed.
I mean, it's possible the mana just matters, you know what I mean? So
we're gonna draw a card here. He's gonna draw Spell Pierce and Force of Will, removing Spell Pierce.
Yep.
I think I would have liked better to just play Force removing Force, so that in the off chance that he does get to cast a Spell Pierce, like it might end up mattering.
I would have just probably rather started things with I would have preferred to just hard cast Force of Will as the first action.
Okay.
And then you still have Snapcaster, you still have Force of Will plus blue card to pitch to fight again, and you have a mana left over to give a spin with Divining Top to fight over things as well.
Gotcha.
So I didn't like initially leading the way that Joe did, but it looks like his 1 Force of Will was enough to keep the Hive Mind off the table, and now the 2 Snapcasters are knocking it down to a 2-turn, now 1-turn clock.
Now 1-turn clock. And yeah, that Brainstorm, the judges there, that Brainstorm is removed because it was the target of a Snapcaster Mage. Top comes back into play. Joe knows his top 2 cards. And then Bryan looks to be out of gas. There's a Pact Negation in his hand, but that's not going to do it.
There's a concession, yep.
So Joe Lossett up a game with his Blue-White Miracles deck list.
That deck is very challenging to play.
Very challenging to play. There's a reason I don't cast Brainstorm
right.
for Legacy.
Yeah.
It's just not for me.
So the major problem that Joe has here is he has a lot of just devoted anti-creature cards, which don't do anything here.
Sure.
He has 3 copies of Swords of Plowshares, a Moat, 4 copies of Terminus, and that's it. So he has 8 anti-creature cards he has to take out of this deck. His sideboard actually has quite a bit that he can bring in here. He has 2 copies of Surgical Extraction. He might only bring in 1 because he has Cunning Wish in his deck, so it's possible he would want a 1-1 split.
Sure.
Extraction being very good against Intuition, and then also other spots as well. He has 3 copies of Meddling Mage. It's pretty awesome here.
Agreed.
Another copy of Spell Snare, and another copy of Counterspell. He also has 2 Disenchants in the sideboard. I'm not a huge fan of them. Like, it can tag Monolith, and it can be good there. But it doesn't really work at breaking up Hive Mind. Hive Mind comes into play, and then Bryan has priority just to play all of his packs.
Sure, to finish comboing.
Yeah.
Off.
Can really only effectively tag Monolith.
Looking at Bryan's deck list, not a ton of sideboard in. He has 4 Ley Lines of Sanctity and 4 Ley Lines of the Void. Clearly, this is not the match where you want either one of those cards. The cards of interest that he does have are 1 Flusterstorm and 2 Diverts. Divert being mediocre at best, I would think.
Yeah.
And then Flusterstorm being okay for when you do get into those counter wars. But again, only 1 copy, can't really find it. Something that he'll likely board in, but it's not something that he can rely on or reliably draw as a sideboard card. Things that he can sideboard out, however, are a better question. And looking at his deck list, I mean, Gitaxian Probe is the kind of card that you could potentially sideboard out for these cards, but I think having the information that Gitaxian Probe provides.
Yeah, I would be not really willing to get rid of Gitaxian Probe. I can see it in other matchups where, like, the non-Force of Will matchups, where it's just kind of, whatever. Most of the time, those decks are also attacking you, so your life total matters. But in this matchup, there's so much stuff to play around, and also just having the information of, like, there's going to be some percentage of the time where Joe's basically caught with his pants down, like he has no way to fight over what you're doing. Yeah. Having that information is valuable too. I can see wanting to shave out some 1-costers because of counterbalance being in the deck. Like, you'd rather, if you're going to be under counterbalance, you'd rather be drawing more 3s and 6s and 5s and fewer 1s.
Sure.
So that could be a thing. But I think Gitaxian Probe has a lot of value here.
Well, I assume that Bryan is going to board in that Flusterstorm and 2 Diverts. We're just not entirely sure what he's going to board out for.
Right, yeah.
That part's going to be difficult to predict. Now, my question for you, Patrick, because we have the deck list in front of us, and Joe has not seen all of Bryan's deck. For example, Joe is not aware that Bryan has access to 4 Show and Tells. Now, I believe that these Meddling Mages are going to come in. Are we just going to name Hive Mind with the Meddling Mages, do you think? Do you think he knows he has Show and Tell? Because he didn't see Show and Tell or Emrakul.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of these decks do. I think the assumption is that there's show and tell there, just because, I mean, it's just another way to get hive mind into play sooner. And then once you have show and tell on the deck, then it's easy to justify playing something like Emrakul. I could see him naming Hive Mind. I could also see him trying to name a card that he's certain will be there and can facilitate an engine no matter which engine Bryan's going for. So cards like Intuition or Force of Will, if you suspect that he could be on a show and tell Emrakul plan, could also be good there.
Okay.
So I think that you can hedge a little bit with your meddling mages by naming cards like that.
Okay.
But it's possible he doesn't know. I mean, I would suspect that show and tell's in the deck, but I don't think you necessarily assume Emrakul is there as well.
Like this particular name, it wouldn't surprise me a ton if Joe got caught off guard by like a show and tell, putting Emrakul into play.
Right.
Instead of, the way that first game played out a little bit longer, things got a little bit grindier, and then Bryan was trying to build his way to force through a hive mind, where this game Bryan was like, yeah, turn 2 show and tell. And Joe's like, oh, well, I wasn't expecting you to be able to go off that quickly.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see exactly how these games do play out. Part of the allure of Joe's deck, as the players are deciding their mulligans, again, is the Sensei's Divining Top plus Counterbalance combination, along with being able to activate top to, Terminus, something like that. And those kind of things, the reason that the Ruler of Miracles deck is good and kind of its engine, don't really work very well in this matchup.
Right, yeah. It is weird. You are used to Counterbalance being the ace in your combo matchups.
Yeah, when you assemble the soft lock of Counterbalance Sensei's Divining Top, it's normally game over or close to it.
Yeah. That game, it did very, very little. I mean, it probably warped the way Bryan played a couple of turns.
Sure.
So it did greater than 0, but it wasn't, locking out a bunch of his stuff. So turn 1 Flooded Strand. Finding a basic island. This usually signals a sorcery speed card drawer, so either a Ponder or a Gataxian Probe.
Indeed. Or he could also potentially be playing around Stifle as well, but we will see a Ponder here. One of them was a Misty Rainforest, the other two are a surprise.
I think it was 2 fetches plus a show and tell.
Good eye, Sniper.
Joe draws.
See a Tundra and just a pass back. Show and tell was the second card. You may have been right on all 3. And you had all of 3 seconds to look at them. I am impressed.
I have a much better eye for the cards that are 15 years old than the cards that are a year old.
That's why they pair us. That's why they do.
Exactly.
So we'll see an island here and a Sensei's Divining Top from Joe.
I mean, I played in standard tournaments where show and tell was a thing, so.
Sure.
Yeah.
As we see a Brainstorm on the end step from Bryan. Searching for some action, he's going to be able to clear the top of his deck with the cards he puts back from the Brainstorm with the Scalding Tarn.
I think he's a little mana heavy right now, so I think there's some lands coming back.
And this is going to put Bryan down to 19. He's going to search for his 1 Volcanic Island.
I guess he doesn't have enough red spells to support it, but I actually like having Red Blast a lot in the sideboard of this sort of deck. But I guess he's willing to make a lot of concessions to just have his mana base be stable, which I can also understand.
Yeah, and he can potentially, he's got a good way to fight with Pact Negation as well.
Because the logjam is often when you're like fighting these counter spell wars. The logjam often is mana. All right, there's a
monolith here.
Top in response.
2.
Meddling Mage, Caracas, Surgical Extraction on the top.
Good eyes. Good eyes.
Yeah. So Caracas also being a great answer if he's on the show and tell Emrakul plan.
Yeah.
Just incidentally, incidentally covered against that.
Fairly good here, and Joe kept Meddling Mage on top, so he's likely going to name Hive Mind here with this Meddling Mage. And we know that Bryan has a Hive Mind in his hand, and then the Caracas is covering like the back end of it. Now, of course, show and tell putting in Hive Mind into play gets through both of those two cards.
Looks like Joe's brought in his disenchant here. I think he's just going to cast it on the monolith. Oh no, we're going to let it go for 1 turn.
All right, we're going to see a meddling mage. And we'll get confirmation from our table spotter for sure on what it's naming.
I'd have to imagine it's Hive Mind.
I would have to imagine that as well. And it is Hive Mind.
Hooray. So I don't think Joe has a lot of permission in his hand. And so he has to actually just, you know, answer the card that he can't beat instead of like trying to fight over something like naming a card that potentially gives Bryan value in other places, like intuition. Like
Sure.
he might, there just might be the immediate threat that he's exposed.
I think we're going to go for it here. I see a show and tell. Bryan drew a Force of Will this turn. He's going to be able to play around Spell Pierce quite well. So we're going to see a show and tell put on the stack here with a colorless mana floating.
He's got Show and Tell, Force of Will back up.
Let's see how Joe's going to opt to respond.
Yeah.
You are correct. Joe does have a disenchant in his hand. A Sacrifice of the Misty Rainforest is going to be his first response, searching for a Tundra. Going to knock Joe down to 19. We're likely going to see a Brainstorm in response to this Show and Tell being put on the stack as well.
This is also why, an example of why I was not a huge fan of bringing in Disenchant here. It's like, drew his Disenchant, Bryan actually drew and cast a Monolith, and it still stunk.
Yeah, it still didn't have much of an effect, yeah. So Joe weighing his options. We do know that Bryan's hand does contain a Hive Mind to put into play off the Show and Tell. There's also a Pact of the Titan in his hand.
Yeah.
And you're also going to find a Force of Will, and I believe a blue card. So
Yeah, he's got it. He's got it all rolled up.
what do we bring into class?
Dang.
And there's a Pact of the Titan.
Dang.
That's going to do it.
Okay, yep.
So Bryan Eleyet takes down game 2, which is going to put Joe Lossett on the play for game 3. We'll see if either player is going to change the way that they opt to sideboard, but I would be surprised if that were to occur.
All right. So for those of you who might not be Legacy experts, the way that that combo actually works is that Hive Mind says either player, when anyone plays that instant or sorcery, every other player gets a copy of that spell. So you play that with the packs. It gives your opponent copies of the pack, which include the during your next upkeep, pay mana cost or lose the game text. So the deck gives you a bunch of copies of packs that presumably you can't pay the upkeep for.
Correct. And because you're passing the turn back to them, they have to pay the upkeep
Right.
cost first before you do, and then they're typically unable to do that, and that is game over.
Yeah. Although there are weird situations where decks are, you know, I've definitely seen matches where a deck could actually pay for a Red Titan pack,
Yes.
for example.
Yeah.
So it isn't actually like a guaranteed lock. You can also stifle out of some triggers, and there's other cards you can kind of answer once it's in play. But part of the charm of the combo deck is once Hive Mind's in play, it's super durable. It's like very hard. There's very few cards that actually matter.
Yeah. And that's the reason. Excuse me. That's the reason that you'll find like a card, like you said. Some people can pay for a Pact of the Titan,
Yeah.
so that's why you find like the one Summoner's Pact in this deck list, because some people just aren't able to pay the green on that. So.
Yep. I also watched a match at one of the opens back in the day where Chris Van Meter actually just cast a red pack and went beatdowns.
Ooh.
Yeah. AKA Plan C.
4 mana beatdowns. What you got on this?
5 mana.
Excuse me, 5 mana 4/4 beatdowns.
Yeah. Beast attack you. Pay for it and then start going to town.
This is easier to cast than Beast Attack.
Yeah.
Beast Attack ain't got nothing on Pact of the Titan.
Yeah. Beast attack is like 2 Pact of Titans though, because with the flash it back.
If you want to get into semantics,
Yeah.
we can do that. It's also green. So
Sure.
it's not easy to cast.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying it is.
I always like that card.
Nor will we want it to be, because this is quite powerful. At least in limited, it's quite powerful.
Why was that card an instant?
I don't know.
It just seemed like it was the card was ridiculous, right? I wasn't playing a ton back then, but I can only imagine how good that card would be. Especially
In
as flashback.
draft,
Yeah.
it was bananas.
Yeah, in limited it just seems completely bananas.
Yes, it was out of control.
So I think, strategy is really going to be the same. I think things change for Joe now,
Yeah.
especially with his meddling mage.
Yeah, he's
Now
got full information now.
Now it gets to the point of what card am I going to name? Am I going to name Show and Tell, or am I going to name Hive Mind? Or like you said, am I going to name Intuition, Force of Will? Like his meddling mages, there's a lot more stress on them now for him to name correctly.
Yeah, just a lot of it's predicated on what his hand's like too. He cares about different cards at different times depending on how much permission. If is it Force of Will or soft permission like Spell Pierce, like that factors into to what gets named.
As both players are going to keep their opener.
And then turn to Glacial Fortress and the Meddling Mage. Glacial Fortress has started to show up a little bit in and the similar lands to that, like Darkslick Shores, whatever, have started to show up in some of these control decks as a way to hedge against choke.
Gotcha.
It's a Tundra or an Underground Sea or whatever that still untaps under choke.
Gotcha.
So a lot of these decks, Joe has how many copies? He has 2 copies in his deck, and playing some of those lands is becoming more commonplace within like the Stoneblade decks and blue black, the blue black control decks and blue white control decks, that sort of stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I was actually kind of wondering why I was seeing that.
Yeah.
Because obviously he has a moat in his deck. I don't think that card availability is much of a problem. But he's opting, as you said, to play 2 Glacial Fortress, and you see that he only has 3 Tundra in his deck. So It's definitely a choice that he's made.
I definitely played in the PTQ season of like Illusions Donate 10 years ago, where people were like cutting Volcanic Island for Shivan Reef because of Boil. Like that was the thing that was going on.
Sure. It's a nice trump to those type of cards.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. As we see a Meddling Mage being put on the stack, a Brainstorm in response. Looks like we're going to hide away a Show and Tell and an Ancient Tomb.
Yeah. If he has the reason this is a tough decision is if he has I don't know if he has a shuffle effect. If he does, he can basically bury away the card that he feels Joe is most likely to name, which is another sort of a mental mini game here that goes on with the Meddling Mage. I don't know if he has a shuffle effect in hand, but
it looks like he's just going to let Meddling Mage resolve. And we'll get confirmation on what that is naming momentarily. I think it's a Show and Tell, but I'm not 100% positive as we see a Grim Monolith be put into play.
Meddling Mage in for 2. Okay. Show and Tell got named.
And Chris Picula doesn't just stop spells from being cast. Excuse me, Picula. He also beats down. As we see a counterbalance be put into play here for Joe.
So he just drew a Show and Tell.
Ancient Tomb.
We do have Hive Mind. We could just go for it. We could just try to land it here. I don't know how much backup he has. I think he has a Force of Will and a blue pack. I actually don't know if he has anything to win the game with this turn, even if he did get it to resolve.
I mean, the nice thing about Hive Mind is that, it's a card that you can put it into play and then you can just say go.
Yeah.
You don't have to win immediately.
So unless Terminus is still in Joe's deck, I assume that he's not going to bother triggering or revealing a card to counterbalance.
I think the only reason that he would trigger and reveal it just so he can get some information for himself.
Well, he has a Brainstorm in hand, so I think that he could... Yeah, he's going to crack, I think, the Brainstorm in response. I mean, it's possibly kept maybe 1 or 2 copies of Terminus in his deck, both as a 6 to reveal the counterbalance and possibly a hedge against a card like Emrakul, but I'm not sure. It also seems dodgy. But
let's see what a Brainstorm can do.
Yeah, I saw that decks like Belcher play it, so I decided
3.
You get to draw a card, you also get to see your opponent's hand. So it's a good card. I signed it out for mine.
So he has a Force of Will, but I believe that's it.
Sure.
There is a Spell Pierce as well in Joe's hand now, but obviously can't cast that.
Yeah.
Red,
Trying to figure out what he wants to leave on top. Both he needs to figure out A, what he wants to pitch to Force of Will, and B, what he wants to leave on top in case, you know, Bryan has any follow-ups.
Indeed. So we're going to see a Force of Will here. It's going to remove a Jace the Mind Sculptor. We're going to see a Force of Will come back.
Removing Show and Tell.
Yeah, it's best to wait for the deck, but yeah, if they just try to kill it on site, then
Alright, Hive Mind results.
out of removal, because I can still find more.
So he actually can't win the game this turn, even though he has a blue pact, because he can't actually cast blue pact without any spells on his stack.
Correct.
That's why I probably said that with me. I'm not going to support them at all, so you might not need.
So
But
if Joe had his disenchant here, it would be pretty awesome.
I mean, it would be okay. The thing is,
He would lose his counterbalance. Which
he would lose his counterbalance, and also, like, that's a target for the blue pack.
well, he can't blue pack right now, right? Because Bryan doesn't have enough mana to pay for blue pack himself.
Well, Bryan does have enough because he has Ancient Tomb and 2 islands. So
Blue pack's 5. I thought.
is it 5 or 4?
I think it's 5.
Oh no, you're right. You're right. My apologies. You're right. So we're gonna see Jace the Mind Sculptor here, and then that's
Whoa! If he can't blue pack this, right?
Yeah, no, Bryan can't blue pack this. Yeah, you're right. For some reason, I thought it cost 5. I don't know why. Unless we're missing something.
Yeah.
Pack negation. Pack of negation.
It's blue 3, right?
We're bringing pack negation up on the screen. I'm pretty sure Patrick's right that it's 3 blue. For some, I don't know why I think it would be 2 blue.
Like it definitely would have
way too good.
It would definitely would have seen a ton of play in standard if it was 4 to pay instead of 5.
That was just
sort
a
of the
misstep
break
on my end. Yeah, it just has the same casting cost as Force of Will. It's just free.
Magic players, we just need 2 more people to launch a $10 draft. If you're interested in getting in on a draft,
I feel like I have to be missing. All right, so blue pact is on the stack, and I think we're just trying to sort out how Hive Mind works here.
And there's blue pack on the screen for you guys. So yeah, so what's going to happen, as best I know, is that 2 blue packs are going to go to stack. Joe's copy of blue pack, Bryan's copy of blue pack, then Joe's copy of blue pack, and then Joe's copy of blue pack goes on the stack first. Now, obviously, Bryan got second place in the Grand Prix with this deck, so he definitely knows more of how this interaction works than I do.
Yeah.
But when Joe's goes on, it has to counter the Jace, correct? Or it has to just counter the blue pact? Yeah, it counters the blue pact. As we see a Terminus, so he actually did leave in Terminus.
Okay, yeah.
And he just passes back. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, so Bryan ends up winning that.
Okay, all right. So yeah, he has to go. It has to target the Jace, and then.
So what happens is Hive Mind's in play.
Okay.
Joe casts Jace.
Okay.
Bryan blue packs it. Bryan's blue